A brief history of modern Indonesia for political risk analysts. Dutch colonial rule and World War One. During World War One, the Dutch East Indies, as Indonesia was then known, remained under the control of the Netherlands, which stayed neutral in the conflict. Although the war didn't reach Indonesian territory directly, it disrupted trade, increased economic hardship, and intensified dissatisfaction with colonial rule. In this period, early nationalist movements began to take root. Organizations like Budi Utomo in 1908 and Sarakat Islam in 1912 laid the groundwork for political consciousness among Indonesians, especially the emerging native elite and Muslim community. Rise of nationalism and Japanese occupation. The interwar period saw the rise of Indonesian nationalism. The Indonesian National Party, or the PNI, founded by Sukarno in 1927, called for independence through non-cooperation with the Dutch. Despite repression, nationalist ideas spread among the youth, intellectuals, and religious leaders. During World War II, Japan invaded and occupied Indonesia from 1942 to 1945. Though harsh and exploitative, Japanese rule weakened Dutch colonial authority and allowed nationalist leaders like Sukarno and Mohammed Hatta to organize politically. Japan also trained Indonesian youth and created local militias, which later played key roles in the independence struggle. Proclamation of Independence and the Revolution. After Japan's surrender in August 1945, Sukarno and Hatta proclaimed Indonesian independence on August 17, 1945. However, the Netherlands sought to re-establish control, leading to a four-year Indonesian national revolution. Despite two Dutch military offensives and international pressure, Indonesia maintained its resistance. The revolution garnered strong domestic support and international sympathy, especially from India, the Soviet Union, and the United States. After negotiations mediated by the UN, the Dutch formally recognized Indonesia's sovereignty in December 1949. Sukarno and guided democracy. The early post-independence period was politically chaotic. Indonesia adopted a parliamentary democracy, but instability, regional rebellions, and economic woes plagued the young republic. In response, Sukarno dismantled the parliamentary system in 1959 and introduced guided democracy. Centralizing power around himself, he promoted Nasakam, or nationalism, religion, and communism, as an ideological umbrella to unify competing forces. Sukarno's foreign policy was assertive and anti-imperialist. He championed the non-aligned movement, hosted the Bandung Conference in 1955, and later aligned closer to Communist China. Domestically, however, the economy deteriorated, inflation soared, and political tensions deepened. Suharto and the New Order regime from 1965 to 1998. In 1965, a failed coup attempt, blamed on the Indonesian Communist Party, or the PKI, triggered a massive anti-communist purge. An estimated 500,000 to 1 million people were killed in one of the worst mass killings of the 20th century. General Suharto seized power, gradually sidelining Sukarno and establishing the New Order regime by 1967. Suharto ruled for over 3 decades, characterized by authoritarianism and suppression of dissent. Strong military influence in politics, like the dual function doctrine, the economic liberalization and foreign investment, and dramatic reductions in poverty and increases in literacy. Indonesia experienced rapid economic growth, aided by oil exports and development aid. However, Suharto's regime was also marked by corruption, human rights abuses, and centralized control. In 1975, Indonesia invaded East Timor, annexing it in 1976. The occupation led to international condemnation and decades of armed resistance. Fall of Suharto and Reformasi era, 1998 to 2004. The Asian financial crisis in 1997 to 1998 devastated Indonesia's economy, leading to mass protests and Suharto's resignation in May 1998. This marked the beginning of the Reformasi, or the Reformation era. Key reforms followed: democratization, multi-party elections, presidential term limits, and decentralization of government, press freedom and civil liberties, the establishment of the Corruption Eradication Commission, or the KPK. East Timor held a UN-supervised referendum in 1999 and voted for independence. In 2002, East Timor became a sovereign nation, ending decades of Indonesian occupation. Democratic consolidation and terrorism from 2004 to 2014. In 2004, Indonesia held its first direct presidential election, won by Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, or SBY, a former general. His presidency lasted from 2004 to 2014, and he oversaw continued economic growth, averaging 5 to 6% annually, expansion of anti-corruption efforts, disaster response after the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and struggles with Islamist terrorism, including the 2002 Bali bombings and subsequent attacks. Indonesia became the world's third largest democracy, known for its relatively peaceful political transitions and vibrant civil society. The Jokowi era and regional leadership from 2014 to 2024. Joko, known as Jokowi, was elected president in 2014 and re-elected in 2019. A former furniture businessman and mayor, he was Indonesia's first president from outside the military and political elite. Jokowi's presidency focused on massive infrastructure development, roads, airports, and railways, digital economy and startup ecosystem growth, health and education reforms, and managing the pandemic. However, his government faced criticism for shrinking democratic space and weakening of anti-corruption institutions, controversial omnibus law reforms seen as favoring investors over labor rights, environmental degradation from mining, deforestation, and palm oil expansion. In foreign policy, Indonesia positioned itself as a leader in ASEAN, playing mediating roles in Myanmar's crisis and South China Sea disputes. Joko also initiated plans to move the capital from Jakarta to Nusantara on the island of Borneo to address overcrowding and environmental issues. Indonesia in 2025. By 2025, Indonesia is the fourth most populous country with over 275 million people. Among the top 20 global economies, it is also a member of the G20, a major voice in the global south, advocating for equitable development, investing heavily in green energy, though coal remains dominant. Indonesia faces key challenges: youth unemployment and skills gaps, religious and ethnic pluralism occasionally strained by intolerance, balancing economic growth with environmental sustainability, and navigating US-China tensions, maintaining a non-aligned but strategic stance. The 2024 presidential election brought a new leader, likely a Joko-endorsed candidate, with expectations of continuity in development and governance, though democratic health remains a subject of concern.